Alright, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Stephen Duke, and this evening we're going to discuss why raising the minimum wage is not a good idea. The first minimum wage was enacted in 1894 in New Zealand, according to a site called debate.org. The first in the United States was passed in the Great Depression era under Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Raising minimum wage is not a good idea because it is for those who are entering the workforce, such as high school and college age students. It affects businesses. It raises the wages higher than some public services, and it affects the consumer. So first off, we're going to talk about what the effects are on an entry-level individual. Minimum wage, its target audience is teens who are in high school and college. And according to a site called Downsizing Government, an individual who is a professor at Harvard wrote in his economics textbook that minimum wage is primarily targeted at teenagers because of the fact that it pays for what their work and what their labor is. They don't really have many job skills. So they're building those job skills for future jobs while working at these low-end minimum wage jobs. And according to Journalist Resource, statistics show that individuals under 25 make up about a fifth of the workforce, but they make up about half of those making minimum wage. And most of those individuals use minimum wage for the money they make going to movies, the card shop, weekend activities. So it's not a good idea to raise it. The second reason minimum wage being raised is not a good idea is it affects businesses. And according to the Employment Policies Institute, many businesses can close because of this. And for example, a business in Michigan, a restaurant that was nonprofit, was forced to close its doors because the minimum wage increased and they couldn't pay for it. And it also leaves businesses with two important decisions to make. Choices for their decision to raise minimum wage. Do they cut costs? Or do they raise prices? And this will be discussed a little bit more momentarily. The third reason why raising minimum wage is not a good idea is many of those working fast food or in other minimum wage jobs would be making more than public services. Most of my averages are from BLS.gov, and excluding my calculations. And according to BLS.gov, an individual working fast food with the current minimum wage system as of May 2015 makes roughly about $19,000 a year. According to my calculations, raising the minimum wage to $15, which is about a 207% increase, working 40 hours a week for 160 hours a month for a year, an individual would make about $29,000. That's more than an individual working as a nurse's assistant who makes about $25,000. A veterinary assistant makes about $23,000. And certain public services, such as paramedics in the Birmingham and Hoover area, which comprises of Blount County as well, those individuals make about $27,000. And most of your paramedics, they make $27,000, but they're helping individuals. They have lives in their hands. For example, they're worried about if an individual dies while they're transporting them to the hospital, for example. An individual working minimum wage doesn't have to worry about that. So I think it's unfair for an individual working as a paramedic or any other public service to make less than an individual working fast food. Alright, the fourth and final reason raising minimum wage is not a good idea is the effects it has on the consumer. Alright, the consumer is affected because a business has to determine whether or not they're going to raise prices or cut costs elsewhere. And more oftentimes than not, they raise prices. And they raise those prices on commodities such as gasoline, food, water, and other groceries that we buy every day. And according to Journalist Resource, raising the minimum wage is also directly proportional to unemployment increases. For example, during the Great Depression, unemployment when the minimum wage was enacted under the Great Depression at 25 cents, unemployment increased 10 to 13% of individuals that lost their job. If the minimum wage was increased to about, say, 10.10, for example, 500,000 workers would lose their jobs. So raising minimum wage, not a good idea for anybody. So to conclude, raising the minimum wage is not a good idea, obviously, because it affects everyone, businesses and consumers alike. Most of your individuals working for minimum wage are primarily going to be those who are entering the workforce for the first time. Businesses have to make important decisions as to what they're going to do to make up for those costs. Businesses such as public services will be making less unless they raise their wages as well. And lastly, it affects the consumer. So think about where you work right now. Would you want an individual who's working for fast food, for example, making minimum wage, would you want them making more than you? Thank you and have a good evening.